Welcome to the Code with Jason Meetup. This evening, we're going to be talking about freelancing, and we have a guest tonight, Jeremy Smith. Welcome, Jeremy.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. This is the second time in the Code with Jason Meetup we've had a guest. The last time it was Jorge Manrubia from 37 Signals. And yeah, tonight we're going to be talking about freelancing, and Jeremy is an experienced freelancer, and I have a background in freelancing myself. So before we get into it, let me turn it over to you, Jeremy. And how about you introduce yourself? And maybe this would be a good chance for you to plug Blue Ridge Ruby also.
Okay, cool. Okay. Okay, so let's see. I am a Rails developer and a designer. I've been working as a freelancer for 10 years, and I've been doing web design development for 20. Most people think I'm in my 20s. I'm 42. I have a wife and 3 kids. Two of them are teenagers, so I have been around for a little while. Let's see. I've been doing Rails since 2009, almost exclusively. And let me see. I left my last full-time employment in 2013. I turned my full-time job into my first contract, went out and grabbed another one, and basically just haven't looked back since then. And there are a lot of reasons why I went that route, a lot of benefits, a lot of also challenges with that. But I'm still doing it. I keep picking this, and I think I've learned quite a few good lessons along the way. And I'm still a big fan of this and like encouraging other people that want to do it. I definitely don't know everything about freelancing, and I have my own approach. It may or may not work for everyone else, but definitely like talking about it. I think, and then a couple of new things for me on top of my sort of normal client work. This year I started the Indie Rails podcast with my friend Jess. That's a podcast focused on the intersection of independent business and Rails. We actually had Pascal on. Your episode's coming out very soon, I believe. And we just had Chris Oliver. That was our last episode. It just came out. And so it's been really fun. And then I'm also putting on my first Ruby conference. It's in Asheville, North Carolina, June 8th and 9th. And I am just in the thick of all the details about that right now. Just so many things. But it's coming together, and I'm really excited about it. And I think it's going to be a good time. It's kind of like this big epic thing I wanted to do this year, and it's been cool.
Yeah, it's really cool to see. There's been a resurgence of Ruby conferences. There's so many happening this year.
Yeah.
It's really great to see all that coming back.
Like what? Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Okay, so in advance of this meeting, I solicited questions from people, got quite a few questions. And I was happy to see that there was one question that was the top question, and it was the correct question to ask. And so I'm really, really happy. We got a smart crowd. You guys asked the right question. And the question is, how do I get clients? And the reason I say that's the right question is because, a lot of freelancing resources, you'll find stuff about how to set up an LLC, what to put on your business card, stuff like that. That stuff's easy. And like, you can have ChatGPT tell you what to do for that stuff. But it's harder to get clients. And the thing is, if you can successfully get clients, good clients, then everything else everything else will work out. I was going to say everything else takes care of itself. That's not quite the case. But if you can get good clients who pay well and all that stuff, the other stuff is fine. You're not going to have a problem. But if you can't find good clients who pay well, none of the other stuff even matters anyway, because you're like screwed. So that other stuff is not the stuff to focus on. Getting good clients is the main thing to focus on. And so that's what Jeremy and I kind of agreed we would spend most of our time on this evening. I did get some other questions in the meantime. May or may not have time to get to those, but I do want to spend most of our time on how to get clients, because in my mind, that's the absolute most important thing. So, big question for you, Jeremy. How do you get clients?
Yeah, I I think it is a really important question. I may have a slightly different opinion about whether it is the sort of the foundational question or the thing that solves everything else. And I haven't quite figured out how to say this, so I'm sort of workshopping this. But if my teenage son came to me and asked me, "How do you find a girlfriend?" I would say, like, maybe that's the wrong question to start with. Like, maybe start with kind of being the kind of guy that would be a good boyfriend. Like, start with that first, and then go to where nice girls are and hang out and get to know them and look for opportunities, sort of be open to opportunities. And this is not a perfect parallel, and I don't know if I necessarily love this analogy, but there's like a way that I feel like it doesn't always solve itself, because if you get a bunch of people knocking down your door for business, but you can't um, meet their needs, or you don't take care of them well, and they head out, you get churn, you basically, then you still haven't solved the problem. If you're not the person that would make a good consultant or freelancer to begin with, that's like the first, I would say that's maybe step zero. So this kind of is related to what I'd first say, which, and this is preliminary. We'll definitely get into the other stuff, but preliminary is, don't try to, if you're early career dev, or whatever skill set it is, don't go into freelancing first. Go to a place where you can get mentorship, where you can skill up, where you can put in the hours, learning your trade, and then make that shift into freelancing. And so you may already be there if you're thinking about it, but I would start there, and I would definitely not advise. It's just like tackling the skills that you're getting paid to do, as well as the skills of self-management, marketing, sales, running a small business, the accounting and finances, the taxes, client management, relationship management. It's just so many other things. It's very multifaceted. And so if you're, just out of college, or if you're, changing careers into this from, and you haven't worked in client services before, this would be really, I think it's just like makes it way more challenging. So I'd start there. Once you've got those skills down and you're at least sort of like mid-level developer, then I think dipping your toes into freelancing can make a lot of sense. And you can test that even when you have a full-time job. If you have time, like obviously that means needing some available free time, but that's another thing I would advise. So anyway, that's sort of step zero. So, but then like step one, like this question is like, how do I find clients? It really means like, how do I market, and how do I do sales? So sales and marketing is really what's behind that. And if you're like me and all you wanted to do was like build web apps or code, build products, then the sales and marketing part was not something that you wanted to do. It wasn't something you wanted to get good at. But unfortunately, if you want to do freelancing, like you have to learn something about doing sales and marketing, and you don't have to be a master at it. One of the benefits is, if you want to be if you want to be a full-time salesperson, you have to be at a totally different level, but you're also bringing in a totally different level of work. You're bringing in work maybe for an entire agency. If you work for an agency that has 50 developers and you're out there pounding the pavement to bring in deals, that's a totally different scale. And I would not compare myself to any of those kind of salespeople or even marketing teams. But like everybody's got a pipeline to fill, a pipeline of work that they need to fill. And so you need to find a way to fill your own pipeline. And to do that, you have to learn to do some sales and marketing. And so if you've never read any sales or marketing books, now's the time to start. I've got some recommendations on those. And I guess maybe another sort of angle for this is like, when you're thinking about like, how do I find clients? Um, my response back would maybe be, well, what kind of clients do you want? What kind of problems do you want to solve? Um, what kind of relationships do you want to have with your clients? Because just because you have software development skills doesn't mean you're going to do one job. It's not just like a plug me into, if you're coming from full-time employment, the sort of natural next step might be, well, let me do full-time contracting, and that's totally fine, but it's very similar to full-time employment. And so the further you go, the more you're looking for maybe ways to shift that and have a different relationship or different service offerings with customers. So that might be productized services. It might be what I do right now is fractional retainer contracts. Like for example, right now I have two clients that have Rails apps. One is an older Rails app that's fairly stable, and I build features on it and keep it up to date. The other is a newer Rails app, and I'm doing primarily back end with one other front end developer on that one, also building features on that one. They're both like solo founder clients, and I do about 10 hours a week for each one of those. Now, I'm doing that right now. That's sort of lower than I would normally do in terms of hours, like of availability I would usually try to fill. But because I'm doing a conference in June, basically since January, I've been putting like 10 hours a week into the conference. When June hits and we finish the conference, probably I go on vacation in July. By August, I'll look for ways to ramp my hours back up and kind of finish out Q3 and 4 with a little bit more. Now I am doing hourly billing, and so that's a whole nother thing. So what I do is in some ways similar to employment, where I have a long-term relationship with a client, with a customer. I fill a role rather than providing one deliverable, and I'm sort of embedded long-term. So but it's in a fractional way, and that's like one example of a way that you could approach this. So it's just one way. So there's like contracting, where you find jobs that you might do for a year or two, or it renews every year, something like that. There's like fractional retainers, which is like what I've been doing for several years. There's just like project-based work, which would be like somebody needs a new web app, they want it done in 3 months. You go, like you win this work, and then you do it in 3 months, and then you go find the next one. I did that in my 20s for a while, just like project-based freelancing, and that was super stressful to me. It did not work for me. It was this roller coaster of go out and find a client, figure out how to estimate the cost of this job, make sure I can do it, get the sale, do the work, finish it as quickly as possible. Oh no, the scope blew up. Now I'm like really scrambling to like finish this work, because I had a set price or whatever, get them to pay me, and then go do it all over again and over again and over again. It was just like this roller coaster. I'm not a big risk taker, and I don't like that kind of roller coaster personally. So that was super stressful. I'm sure it works for some people. It did not work for me. So what I'm describing is there's really a lot of ways to do freelancing, and the different ways means different types of clients that want different things. If you've got a company that's ready to spend 50 to 100K, and in 4 or 5 months or whatever, knock out, V1 of an app, that is a totally different kind of client than one that's got $2,000 a month that can give you a maintenance contract. They want totally different things from you, and you're structuring things in a different way. You're really looking for different people who have different needs. So if it's kind of like it's like, well, where do I find, how do I find fish if I'm gonna be a fisherman? Like, how do I find fish? Well, there's different kinds of fish. You're gonna have to go to different places. You're gonna have to use different bait. You're gonna have to, and you're still gonna have to sit there and keep throwing that line out until you finally get some. So there's like also a time and aspect to it as well. But you kind of have to go different places for the different kinds of fish that you're going after. And I don't think that you have to just pick one spot to go. I think you can really go to a lot of different places, but you want to make sure that the kind of work that you're offering is the kind like matches what you can deliver. And what I found was that project-based work was just really difficult for me. I like building a long-term relationship with my clients. I like filling a role rather than just having one giant deliverable. I don't like doing project estimation on the front end. I like doing hourly work. I don't mind, and people say don't do hourly. I don't mind it. I actually like it. I prefer it, not having to think about estimating every little thing and then hoping that I can reach that. I'd rather just have that to the side. I give you this, this amount of time, and together we solve problems. I fill this role for you. And that works for me. It may not work for you, but there's something that probably does. And sometimes it's multiple things. So let me think. Kind of going down the rabbit trail there. Any questions on that stuff? I don't want to just kind of keep going.
Well, I can maybe share a couple thoughts from my end.
Yeah.
A couple things. So big picture wise, all right. So I'll share, I guess, a little bit of my background freelancing. I started programming in the 90s when I was a kid. And then I got my first real programming job in like 2005. And then I freelanced on and off from 2011 to the present. And what I discovered as time went on freelancing, I had this like vague idea in my mind of this like dream life where I had all this freedom and money and stuff like that. And I never achieved it. And bit by bit over time, I kind of realized that this dream that I had was like too vague, like it wasn't connected to reality in any way. And then I realized that like this dream life that I was kind of vaguely picturing, like nobody was actually living that life, or at least very few people. And so I met freelancers in my freelancing. I would work alongside other freelancers, and I discovered that like 95% of freelancers are just hourly contractors, which there's nothing wrong with that if that's what you want to do. But it was basically like you're an hourly contractor, you work about 40 hours a week. A lot of times they would even go into the office, work alongside employees, go to all the same meetings. They would just work on tickets just like everybody else. So it was really a distinction without a difference. Like you're an employee, but the paperwork is different. You're just 1099 instead of W-2.
I think there is a
Yeah,
difference. I will just interject there and just say, I think there is a difference. I think it's a really important baby step into the world of running your own business. That for a lot of people, it's just too much of a leap to go from regular employment to this thing where they're throwing out all these productized services and like, they've got all these projects, big things that they're selling, it's just too much. But if you can baby step your way into it, yes, it looks very similar to the other thing, but it is different. You had to set up an LLC. You now have an accountant doing your business books potentially, hopefully. That's definitely something I'd recommend. You're having to think like a business, and that is a major mind shift to stop thinking like an employee and start thinking like a one-person business. And I'm not there, but that was a light bulb moment for me years back when I was like, I'm a one-person business. I get to decide all these things. I need to make these conscious choices as a business. And that's when things start to get even more interesting. But you have to make that first step, I think. And while it looks almost identical, it is different. Change your mindset.
that's a good point. I would agree. Roger.
Sorry, I had to
Oh,
click
it's
lots
okay.
of buttons. Can I just build on that? Because I was just going to say, like, I think that's a huge, huge and underrated thing, the mindset that Jeremy was just talking about. Because, like, all my friends, they get, like, when the cuts come and everything, they're all like victims. Oh, man, I thought, I can't believe it that this happened. And they're mentally completely unprepared. And for me, it's like, man, this this is normal. This is even if it happens in 6 months or 2 years or whatever, my mental state is always ready to, and I'm always out hunting and I'm always out, trying to work relationships and trying to develop stuff. And I don't know, like it doesn't affect me. Even my wife reacts differently. She's just like, oh, did that contract end? And she's like, my friends react differently. Like they're financially, they're even more at risk because they just think differently. Anyway, I really liked what you said there, Jeremy, and it kind of really resonated with me. And I thought I just add a little bit of a illustration to it.
Yeah, I thought that was a good
absolutely.
By the
point.
way, I don't charge hourly.
Yeah.
I don't charge hourly. I charge weekly.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I've heard
I want to
people
get into that administrative game.
Mm-hmm.
I always just tell the client, you could charge hourly, but you'll lose 10% of your money. I almost always go for weekly.
Yeah, I've heard good things about that.
Could you, sorry if I should raise my hand here, but could you talk more
Oh,
about
you're
what does it look like to charge weekly? Like, are you giving them 40 hours that week, or could you talk more in depth about that?
So if I charge, so I have a weekly rate, and all we do is agree work for that week. Wildly abstracts away like this race to the bottom of like, but how many hours is it going to take you? It's like, no, let's discuss the work that needs to be done. These are the items I can get done this week. And it usually gives me lots of flexibility within that week to actually get the work done in the way that makes the most sense. And that I think that's the biggest thing is when you're in the hourly race. And Jeremy, I think this goes to the project stuff too, right? If you're dealing with that project bundle, it's all hours, and that's really where the pinch is. And so if you can move to like a weekly set, then it's much more manageable, much more controllable. Everything is just a sprint, and that's it.
Can I ask what the smallest allotment of hours in a week you would typically do?
I've actually only worked 15 hours a few times.
Okay. Yeah.
A few times in a week. And I know I actually rely on that because I actually double and triple dip sometimes. So I'll sometimes have like 3 clients on a weekly rate. And so that's really where I make my money.
I got you.
Is in that sort of built-in Slack.
Yeah. I was suspecting that if the larger the amount of hours in a week, the easier would be to kind of handle the expectations around what you'd be able to deliver. One of the things that I like is that there's low pressure on that. The expectation is more just like that I hit a certain number of hours a week, and it's less about us. Things aren't tied to a sprint. I'm usually working by myself. If this week for some reason, conference organizing stuff takes over and I'm a little bit low on hours, I don't have to worry about it. At least that's how I think about it, and it kind of works for me. But I have heard several people say do the weekly thing.
Rich, did you have something?
Yeah, I actually still, I think, have the question. Thanks, guys, for the insights. I was wondering if there's maybe any difference between Roger and Jeremy in how you handle something like, well, Roger said, well, I have this weekly slot, and then we define the work for the week or the results for the week. And Jeremy probably as well, right? In your sprint, you have a certain amount of hours, and you guys define kind of goals, right?
I usually don't do sprints, actually.
Oh, I understood it then in the wrong way. Okay, cool. So yeah, I was wondering when you both define the results of the work with your client, how do you handle situations where you get behind, or where, okay, we, like Roger, that we do this project or this thing this week, this is the amount of money it costs, and then how do you go around the situation where you notice, hey, this is actually much more work than anticipated.
Was that, did you ask me that?
Yeah, I think he was asking more you. Ryan.
Both,
Oh,
basically,
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Whether there's difference, yeah.
Jeremy.
I don't have very much stress around that, at least with my current. I will adjust my approach depending on the clients. And what I'm thinking about right now is the clients I have right now. And so for both of them, they're solo founders. They don't have anyone full-time on the team. In one of the teams, there is one other part-time developer on the project. We are adjusting my focus on a regular basis, depending on what the needs are. If a new opportunity comes in and we want to take advantage of it, I'm not like so deep on any one thing that I can't like switch over to that thing. So we're reprioritizing on a regular basis. I think that's actually smart and good for solo founders and for like very sort of like smaller apps and products that need to have a high level of agility. So we're not doing quarterly planning. We're not doing sprints. We're not doing like 6-week shape up, methodology, anything like that. I think that makes a lot of sense if you have a larger team, if your work is very if your role is very well defined and there's a lot of this work and then you can just kind of work through it. But I'm also just involved in a lot of aspects of, I'm sort of like in the passenger seat, like I've got shotgun in these apps. There's this founder in both of these current cases. There's a founder and then there's me. And I'm very close to the user experience, the design, customer support, thinking about upcoming features, thinking about our technical debt, thinking about our deployments, like all that kind of stuff. And at least for right now, it makes a lot of sense to be able to say, oh, like AI is kind of a thing right now. Should we kind of adjust our approach and work on these features right now? Oh, don't forget, we need to do that Rails upgrade too. I'm going to keep bringing that up, but we're continuing to have that conversation. And it's never all right, here's what you're doing for 6 weeks. And you need to just make sure you complete it. If at least for these current clients, that works really well. I think it's what they need. And so being able to adjust your strategy to what your current client needs, I think is really helpful. I don't know that everybody would want to do that or would like doing that. I like it because it kind of gives me I enjoy the figuring out the psychology of the client and what they need and like figuring out what would be the best fit for this project, for this app, for this company right now. And then sort of like fit into that role. And it kind of helps me like have a new approach, a new sort of bag of tricks for this kind of situation or that kind of situation.
Yeah, if I could just double down on what the questioner is asking, though, in more detail, at least what I think he is, like software development is unpredictable, right? Like sometimes you're like, oh, I'm just going to upgrade Devise. And a week later, you're like, damn it, I'm still upgrading Devise. Like it broke 10 other things, And when you're a freelancer, whether you're weekly or hourly or in a project, it's hard to turn to a client and say, well, here's your invoice for me spinning my wheels last week. How do you, deal with the inherent uncertainty of software development when that happens?
I think that this gets back to managing clients and building trust, basically building trust with a client. And this is one of those things. It's like, how do I find clients? Like if you find clients but then they don't trust you, you don't have a good business. So you have to, yes, you have to find them, but then you have to help people trust you. And I'm not saying this is easy. It is not easy, but I think I've had to learn a lot of lessons about how to help bosses trust me, and then translating that into clients trusting me. And when you can't I don't think there's like you can walk into any client relationship and get them to trust you. I don't think it's like that, but there are things that you can do to enhance the trust that they have. And there are things you can do to harm the trust. One of the best books I've read on this subject in the past couple of years, and was going to recommend it, it's my I have a list of recommendations for tonight. One is The Trusted Advisor. It's a fantastic book. It's one of the most helpful things. And there's so much about relationship management and psychology that's so critical to freelancing, because you are like right at the connection point to a client and what they need and their expectation. They are not a manager to you. At least in my experience, managers will often, they have the expectation that you are self-managed. They are coming to manage you and to sort of get the best out of you. But in client relationships, that is not the expectation. They're expecting you to be self-managed, and they're expecting, performance. And so it takes a lot more on your side of things to come with the things that they need to connect to what they care about and to deliver on a regular basis. So when you do fail, or when something does screw up, they still trust you in those moments. And it's sort of hard to maybe like say like how do you do that like in 3 sentences? I don't know. I would need to think about that. But that book is a really good place to start. And it is definitely a thing that like you have to work on. And so that's actually one of the other reasons why I prefer long-term contracts, because these long-term retainers, because I have a more history with a client. I have a longer chance for them to see that I put out good work on a regular basis, and that sometimes I mess up on estimation, or sometimes a thing goes bad, we have to roll back a commit or something like that. And in my experience, the bar is kind of low when it comes to freelancers. Many clients that I've had are like, they tell me stuff about what's happened previous to that, like I couldn't get them to complete work. They wouldn't communicate. They didn't follow through. They weren't thinking about details. I had to babysit, all this stuff, right? The bar is kind of low for many clients. So once you've sold the work, if you can just get a little bit above that and, deliver things, when you do the things that you say that you're going to do, communicate when things go wrong, connect to what they care about in the world. What are they doing? What is their business about? Do everything that you can to enter their head and their world, and care about like the things that they're trying to make. And that kind of stuff helps them to trust you more and more. And there are some clients that are maybe never going to trust you. And there's some people that have been burned so many times, and that may just not be a good relationship, but you can earn trust, but you have to work for it. Anyway, so that's kind of what I think about there.
Yeah, and I have a few things to add to that, if I may. So there's an approach that I usually take with client engagements that goes like this. So I'll use an illustration. There was a case where somebody came to me, they needed some help with a project. And what I proposed to them was that for the first project we just do like this weekend thing, takes me a few hours. It was a kind of thing where we set up a production environment and a staging environment and a couple other things. Just like getting the starting pieces in place for the project. And I said I was going to do it, and I said it would take a certain amount of time, and then I did it, and it took exactly that amount of time. And it was a promise and then a fulfillment of that promise. So that put a little deposit in the bank account. After that, we did a little bit of a bigger project. Instead of a weekend project, it was maybe like a week or two. I set an expectation, I made a promise, then I fulfilled that promise. I did exactly what I said I was going to do when I said I was going to do it. From there, we did a bigger project that was a couple months. Same deal there. And then after that was done, we actually transitioned to an indefinite client relationship. And later on, I became a full-time employee. And that total relationship, that working relationship, lasted 4 years. And I'm still friends with the person today. So that kind of thing, I highly recommend. Do a very small project in the beginning, then do bigger and bigger projects, because that's a lot better than trying to do a big project right from the beginning when the trust is not there yet.
Yeah.
A couple other things. Another thing that kind of greases the wheels as far as trust goes is face-to-face contact. So if you can visit the person, like I don't think I've ever had to do this, but I wouldn't hesitate to pay out of my own pocket to fly and go visit the client, because it just goes such a long way in establishing trust.
I never would have
It's
done that when I
Mhm.
started. I'm such a cheapskate, but now, like, if you think about a customer, a client that's gonna like pay you thousands of dollars a month, potentially for years, we're talking about so much money, and you could do one little flight to go out and see them like once a year or something like that. It's huge. It's totally worth it.
Mhm.
FaceTime with people really helps.
Yeah. Yeah, and you don't even have to do anything specific. Just the very act of being in the same place physically together builds trust.
Yeah.
And then there was a third thing I was going to mention. Oh yeah. Okay. So this is something that is a big long-term investment, but it really pays off. So in my case, I've been writing blog posts for many years. I have a podcast. I do this. There's even other stuff. I speak at conferences, all that stuff. And so I have like a 5-year backlog of all this stuff that, some people have been following me for years, and they listen to my voice on the podcast. They read my blog posts. Maybe we've even interacted personally. And that goes a huge way to building that trust, to the point where somebody might want to hire me, and they don't even there's no interview or anything like that. They just reach out to me and say, "Hey, can I please hire you?" Because they already know me. There's no vetting that needs to be done or anything like that. So that's really helpful. Again, that's a really long-term thing, but it's super, super worth it.
That's part of why I'm putting on a conference this year, why I started a podcast. I never thought I'd be a person that would do either one of those things. Both sounded kind of just fun, kind of epic things, and I'm putting a ton of work into them. Like, if I was like, I'm losing so many billable hours on a conference, right? But I know that, like, if I pull this off, number one, it's going to be a blast. Number two, it puts a lot of goodwill into the community. Hopefully, as long as I pull it off, hopefully it's a great experience that 100 people really enjoy and they'll remember, right? So, like, finding ways to do that, and not, I don't think everybody has to start a podcast to do stuff like that, but if you could find a way to get yourself out there in a way, like, whether it's blogging, there's so many ways to do it, but you have to find a way to, like, sort of increase your surface area so that people can find you. So, like, the random things can happen, and it's funny because it really works. I would not like. I never, like, until last year, I had never even been on a podcast, but then I've been on a bunch in the past 4 or 5 months because we're putting on a conference. So it gave people a reason to talk to me. And why, before, why would they even have talked to me? Which means then a bunch of other people have heard my voice and know that I, do freelance Rails development, which means that more and more, connections can come my way. And it's just like expand sort of your surface area. And it's not like there's an immediate benefit. I do this thing, I follow these 3 steps, and then I will have all these leads coming in. It's certainly not like that. But the more you sort of increase your surface area, there's more random stuff that can just hit, and come your way. And hopefully those things are good things. Hopefully those are, good client leads and stuff like that. So
something Jeremy and I talked about when Jeremy was on my podcast some weeks or months ago. I mentioned the distinction between what I call hunting and farming. So we've been talking about a lot of farming type stuff, like starting a podcast, your conference, Jeremy, blogging, stuff like that. I call it farming because you're like planting these seeds and they don't bear fruit until maybe years later. And they might not even bear fruit at all, but you're just planting all these seeds. It's a long-term investment. Whereas with hunting, you might, for example, hopefully you're not in this situation, but like you go to a conference and you really want to get a client. So you go to a specific conference and your objective at that conference is to get a client there and then. That's like with hunting, you go out on the hunt and maybe you come back with a deer or something, but 9 out of 10 times you come back empty handed. But when you do get something, you get it immediately. In my experience, farming yields better results than hunting. But again, that's a long-term thing. When you're just starting out, you probably want to do hunting. That's how I started out. And then over time, you can kind of taper down the hunting and do more and more farming.
It's like cold outreach, sales outreach is like is the hunting. It's like you decide you want to freelance, and so you call up the 10 people that you know that have a technical business that might need an app, or that have a old Rails app that you're going to ask if they need a maintenance plan on or something like that. Once you've exhausted those, then you're sort of out of hunting options, or your hunting grounds are sort of barren at that point. Then you want to start planting, and that's like the marketing and lead generation for inbound leads. So it is good to do both. One of the things that I learned, or really got hammered in my head recently, is I took Daniel Vassallo's small bets class. I don't know if you've heard of this, but I highly recommend it. In the class, he used to be an AWS engineer. He left to start his own, build his own products. Halfway through, like kind of like burning through his cash on the product, he realized that he didn't have enough runway, and that he needed to kind of change gears and approach his business in a different way. He wanted never to go back to a full-time job. He wanted to stay alive, to survive as a solopreneur, but he needed to change his approach. Instead of taking this big swing on this long-term big product that he was building, he decided to try to make these small bets. And one of the things that he talks about is the difference between the predictable world and the stochastic world. And so like the predictable world is like, this is very rough, but basically like if you want to become a doctor, there's like these steps that you go through. You go to college, you go to medical school, you get your degree, and then you go somewhere, and you will likely, as long as you pass, you will become a doctor. If you want to build a business, there's not a step-by-step thing, because it's so random, it's so unpredictable. The world is just kind of chaotic. So a thing that works for one person doesn't work for another person. A thing that worked for you one year doesn't work another year. There is not just one little playbook and you just follow it. So in this unpredictable world, you want to take on smaller bets, and you want to try lots of bets. And you don't want to overextend yourself and just like continuously betting all the time, but you need a portfolio of bets that you're taking. I bet that if I, did cold outreach to the 10 people I know with a company, with some kind of app or an old Rails app, that I could probably get one of them to become a customer. That's one bet. Another bet is, I bet I could build a landing page where I sell Rails app upgrade services and announce this on Twitter, and maybe I'll get some leads coming in, maybe I'll get some contacts. I bet that if I put out 10 great blog posts, and one of them will get into Ruby Weekly, and if I get one in Ruby Weekly, I'll get 1,000 hits on my homepage, or on my on that blog, and then somebody will see my email down at the bottom and email me. These are all these different bets that you make, and you're looking for it to kind of like spread your risk and spread your time investment, so that you can hopefully get some things that start to pay off. And then you start to kind of build like this idea of like, okay, I kind of see where things are coming from. Oh, Twitter's starting to work for me. Okay, I'm getting more engagement over here, or my blog's working, or this, I'm on Rails devs and I'm getting leads through there. And so you're starting to feel this, but nothing is completely predictable, and things change all the time. So that's an aspect of it that you always have to have in your head, that it's not just static. The thing that worked this year probably won't work next year. You have to be able to change your strategies and your approaches to finding those that work. But you do want to work more toward getting that marketing engine running, so that you've got inbound leads coming to you, rather than you having to go out and kill, hunt and kill something every time you need something. You want it to be coming to you. And I guess that kind of gets back to what I was, in terms of like marketing, there's really a number of approaches to developing inbound leads. And so there's word of mouth when you do good work, especially if you do work that is remarkable in some way you do work that is remarkable. The idea is that others will remark about your work. Oh, this guy, Jeremy, he did such a great job at XYZ. he was fantastic, or whatever it is, right? You want to do work that's remarkable, so word of mouth is one of those ways. Twitter can be a good way to connect to people that need your services. I've never been good at Twitter. Daniel Vassallo has a course on building a Twitter audience, which I always thought sounded kind of cheesy, but I took it last year and it helped me grow my Twitter audience, helped me engage with other developers and other people that might need my services in a way that I had never been able to before. I feel like I started to get it. Then there's your website and like your own content marketing. I have definitely had some leads come in because of blog posts I wrote. So I like there's all these different things that can work, but one thing that has worked for me at least a couple times has been like I posted, I wrote a good blog post. I didn't know it was good. I hoped that it would be good. I submitted it to what's the site? Ruby is it what is it? Ruby Flow? No, what is the site?
I think I know the
Yeah,
one you're
Ruby
talking
Flow.
about. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Ruby Flow. You can submit articles there. I'm pretty sure Peter Cooper of Ruby Weekly reads that and pulls articles from that. And so then I got into Ruby Weekly a couple times. It's read by 30,000 people on the subscriber list. And then I got a big spike of traffic on those blog posts. And then I had a few people say, "Hey, that blog post you talked about such and such, and we actually need that." So that that kind of stuff works too. Going to conferences and meetups and just being friendly and meeting people. I've had that happen a couple times where I've been at a conference. I never was a big conference goer. I was like a cheapskate, didn't want to spend the money. But last year I went to a bunch of conferences, had a blast just making friends with people, not like not hunting specifically, I need work, but just making friends. And then I've had, in the past few months, I've had people say, "Hey, I've got this thing. Do you have any availability?" They just DM me on Twitter. And that works too. As well as things like hiring directories and platforms. That's kind of a common one that people talk about. Like, and one of the best right now is probably like Rails devs. I would get on there. I have gotten work through there. And then just like online communities, like being helpful in Slack groups. And you can't like put all your energy in all of those things, but you can pick a few to try investing in and see if you start to notice some leads coming in. And it can be hard to change your mind, change your perspective. Like it took me a long time to realize that when someone was like, "Hey, we kind of need some help with such and such," I needed to like change my thinking to be like, "This is a lead." Now put it down in my, write it down in my notes to say, "I got this lead from this channel, this lead, this marketing channel, right? And even if I don't convert that lead into a customer, this is a valuable piece of information that somehow the things that I'm doing are working." I don't know if that makes sense, but I think that's really important to do.
Yeah, I do the same thing. Travis, did you have a question?
Yeah, just kind of off the topic, but like, Jeremy, did you have what were your favorite conferences that you went to last year?
So I really enjoyed Sin City. It was fantastic. Jason's conference in Las Vegas. It was pretty small and intimate, and just like got to meet a lot of people that I followed on Twitter for many years and finally have a conversation with them. That was very exciting. We did RailsConf in Portland. That was fun, but it was very big and kind of overwhelming. That would have been it would have been a very hard conference for me to go to if I hadn't gone to Sin City first, because I met a bunch of people, and then when I got to RailsConf, while it was overwhelming, there were a bunch of people that I already met. And so I didn't feel like, oh my gosh, I can't even see these people with their masks on. I don't know who, like, there's the big GitHub group over there and the Shopify group. Is that a group of employees all standing in a circle? Can I like go in and talk to them? Like, so it was very nice to have, people that I already knew. And then I went to Rails SaaS, Andrew Culver's conference in LA, and that was fantastic. And then I spoke at RubyConf Mini in Providence, and all of them were unique, sort of like very different. All of them were great. Jason's was super inspiring for me for Blue Ridge Ruby, and kind of like the kind of conference where you make friends by the time you're done. And so that means a lot to me, and that's a lot of what I'm hoping to pull off with Blue Ridge. But all
That makes me really happy to hear.
Thanks, man. Yeah, all of them were great. RailsConf is certainly the most expensive, and so the smaller conferences are easier to make friends at. You're more likely to get into longer conversations, and they're a little bit cheaper. So, in general, that's probably what I recommend to people.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off of that. It might seem intuitively like the bigger conferences are more worth it because there's more opportunities to meet more people. But I've heard it said, and I agree, that it's better to go to an event like that and make a really strong connection with one single person than to make a shallow connection with like 20 people.
Yeah.
So I would definitely, I would agree with everything Jeremy said. I don't know, sir. I like to go to the small conferences because again, you make friends, and if you go to these things year after year, you see the same people and deepen those relationships and stuff like that. I remember my first RailsConf. I knew there were a lot of people there who I knew, but I couldn't find them because there were just so many people. So my personal strategy now or whatever is I like to try to speak at those bigger conferences, and then maybe I can try to speak at the smaller ones too, but I'd rather attend the conferences, the small conferences, and then speak at the big conferences, because even though I like to speak at conferences because like you go there and you get certain benefits from being there and stuff like that, almost the bigger reason I speak at conferences is so I can have that feather in my cap and list on my bio that I've spoken at this conference and this conference. And like the bigger the conference is, the more like credibility that lends you. So that's how I look at different kinds of conferences.
Yeah, signaling matters. I mean, that definitely helps. All those things, and it doesn't generate the lead for you. Maybe it does like for somebody that saw your talk, but then it certainly helps in the conversion of that. Say, if that was an objection, like, who is this guy? Like, oh, interesting, he's a conference speaker. It helps. It just helps.
Yeah, definitely. Well, there's so much. We've only scratched the surface. There's so much we could get into.
I have so many other notes.
Yeah.
We went a totally different way than what my outline. Like, I had like all these notes for other stuff to talk about. There's so many things we could go into.
So Jeremy, I don't know what kind of time you have this evening, but I'm here. I'll stay here until I'm the last person here. Not really. I'm not going to do that. But I'm up for going a bit longer. I don't know about you, Jeremy.
Yeah, I am. I'm game if other people are interested.
Sure. Well, we got like 14 other people still here, so they haven't hung up on us yet.
Okay, so another big topic around like marketing, sort of related to sales and marketing, that I think is important to touch on is positioning and finding niches. And so when when you're thinking about like how do you find clients and customers, you gotta, like, one of the things that you want to do is find a way to differentiate yourself from other people and not be commoditized. And I mean, you could argue that I still am commoditized. Like, so maybe I shouldn't speak about this, but what I have noticed is that the more you niche down or find niches, the more you can become sort of like the owner of a certain category. And if you find the right categories that have a specific need, that can be really powerful. So, for example, if I gave you this quiz, like niching is like combining multiple things, right? So if you say like, well, who's the person that you know about that does Rails and testing? It's gonna be Jason, right? That's like who you think of. In my head, at least, if I think Rails testing, it's Jason. So if people are looking like they've got a Rails code base and they need somebody to come in and help them with testing, probably the first person they're going to think about is Jason. But there are other people that fill other niches, like, for example, Rails performance.
Yeah, anybody want to volunteer a name for that one?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Nate
Rich got
Brickback.
Nate. Yeah, Rails plus iOS. Yep,
Yep.
Joe. And then Rails plus upgrades, not necessarily a person, but a company.
Well, Ernesto, you need to work on your marketing.
Well, yeah, I mean, people know him by
Yeah,
FastRuby.io. Yeah, so Ernesto Tagwork, or the owner of FastRuby.io. If you've ever done a Rails upgrade and looked for the Rails, a unofficial Rails upgrade guide, you've probably hit their content. They have the best, honestly, it is the better Rails upgrade guides than even the guide stocks, the official guide stocks. So I'm
Yeah.
always using the official guide stocks plus Fast Ruby's guides as well. So their
Side note,
content marketing works.
Yeah, I've had Ernesto on the podcast before, so if you're interested in that topic, you can go listen, and he's coming on again soon too.
Nice. Yeah, he's great. So I'm saying, giving this kind of quiz because there are these niches that people have filled or companies have filled, and then they start to own this category. But those are not the only exclusive categories of Rails plus something else. I'm sort of assuming that everybody does Rails here, and that may not be the case, but like there are other ones. Like off the top of my head, the other night I was thinking like, well, who does Rails plus Fly.io? Who does Rails plus Tailwind? Who does Rails plus Postgres? Who's the person that does Rails plus platform migrations? Who does Rails plus view componentization? Who does Rails plus security? Who does Rails plus usability? And that's just combining two things, right? But you could find those niches, and obviously this is another bet you're making. But I'm betting that I could find enough companies or clients that need Rails plus Postgres. That feels like a decent bet, that you could like own that space and become that person, right? And when you do that, then you start to tailor your marketing toward that niche. So you're writing your blog posts about that, you're talking about that on Twitter, you're like going to the Ruby on Rails link Slack group and providing answers about those specific topics. Maybe you're writing an ebook or doing a video course related to that stuff. And that starts to expose you to the people that are looking for that information, that need something related to that. And eventually, you've got it's a funnel, right? You've got a funnel, and a bunch of people are exposed to your content, and then a few people make it onto your mailing list or contact you. A few people more end up having a conversation with you, and finally a few people convert and become your customers. So it's this funnel, and you want to find a way to capture them, but you need some way to sort of angle the funnel. Like, what are the niches? And you don't need just like, it's okay to have multiple. You can have a couple different niches. You don't have to just hole yourself in like one spot, but you do need to tailor the marketing around those things if you want to kind of own that category.
I'll make a comment here. Jeremy, it seems like a lot of the stuff you're talking about is kind of like authority building type stuff, and it's I've heard this saying, it's hard to find a rich hermit. Like, if you want to be successful in freelancing, you can be like not in public and still be successful. That's possible. I know people who do that. But to me, that's not the route I took. And I did this stuff for other reasons too, like selling products and stuff like that. But it just seems like so much easier if you can become a known entity. And for me, like there's like a menu of options you can pick. There's blogging, writing books, you can be on YouTube, you can do a podcast, you can speak at conferences, you can put on a conference of your own if you're masochistic like me and Jeremy. But you don't have to do all those.
Yeah.
And you can kind of tailor it to your personal strengths and temperament and stuff like that. But it's good to be out there. I knew somebody who didn't even want to put her picture online. And, talk about building trust. Like, it's hard to develop trust when you go to a freelancer's website and you can't even see a picture of the person. They just seem so anonymous. So that's like the bare minimum. And then I think written words are one thing, but having people hear your voice, like my podcast, people hear my voice. If they listen to it regularly, they hear my voice in their ears every single week. That's like very intimate. And I've met people in person and they're like, this is so bizarre feeling. I've heard your voice so many times. I feel like I know you, and now we're meeting in person. People have said that to me. And then video is even stronger. And I think something like this is even stronger because not only are you seeing me on video, but if you're here participating, we're like interacting and like you feel like you know me even more because like we pretty much do know each other.
Yeah.
So I guess the point I wanted to make was like, I think to the extent you put yourself out there and do those trust building things, it just makes it easier and easier to be successful.
I used to think that was like you had to be like kind of egotistical or something like that to like do that. Like, oh, look at those, people that do this, kind of put themselves out and make them, kind of make themselves stand out or whatever. And now I realize like it's really it's not egotistic. It doesn't have to be, at least. Like, you can do this for the benefit of many people. You can be doing this.
Yeah. And I'm not egotistical at all. I'm very humble. Out of all my great qualities, of which there are many, the greatest of all is my humility.
Yeah.
I just had to interrupt you with that. Carry on.
Yeah, no, it's I was just hung up by that. Like, I was hung up on the fact that I don't want to be that kind of person to like put myself out there and act all big or whatever. The reality is, like, I want to do good work. I want to do good work in the world. I want to, and not just for customers and clients. I want to like help other people in their own careers, and I want to write blog content that helps other Rails devs. All those things are things that I care about. And you can do that and put those things out there, and you're just being a helpful person in the world. And there are clients that need your services. If you offer good services, there are people that need it, and they need to know who you are. And the best way to do that is to put yourself out there in some way that helps them find you. Because there are people that are saying, I can't find any good developers. I can't find any developers that stick around. I can't find developers that follow through on the work. And so they're on the other side of it saying, where do I find good developers, right? So I think it's you just kind of take a step in that direction to be found. And I think that can be I don't know, for me, that was helpful to kind of change my framing around it, so I don't like get hung up on the idea that I don't want to do that because like that's just me showing off or whatever, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, a couple other quick comments that are just coming to mind. Certain formats lend themselves to relationship building more than others. And as you're probably gathering, if you didn't already know, like relationship building is like such a huge part of getting clients. Like my podcast, something I didn't think about when I started the podcast is what a relationship builder it is with the guests. And I now have relationships with so many like high profile people. And like before, like they didn't have a reason to talk to me, kind of like what Jeremy was talking about. But now that I have a podcast, I have a pretext to talk to these people, and then we become friends. Same thing with conferences. Like you can go to conferences and make friends, but if you go to a conference and speak, then you're like everybody wants to talk to you. And so it's even easier. And there kind of develops like this different stratum of whatever, where like you develop relationships with the other conference speakers. You start to see these same people at different conferences speaking. And so then you can make relationships with these like high level people. And those relationships are really valuable because then if you ever need something, you can like kind of cash in on those relationships and contact them and say, hey, I'm looking for a client right now, or I'm looking for a new job right now, or something like that. Comes in really helpful. Whereas like blogging, for example, that doesn't like connect you to people so much in that way. So that's another thing to consider when you're thinking about this menu of options.
Yeah. Yeah, it does help to know people that are connected to a lot of other people. And you kind of see that sometimes with the way retweeting works on Twitter. Like if you get retweeted by someone that's kind of has a bigger audience, that can be really helpful. And I don't think you have to just boil down, relationships to that. but there are benefits, and there, like that are worth considering.
Right. Yeah, and there's kind of a halo effect too. Like if you're seen to be associating with these people, they see, oh, he's one of them or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. I think also, okay, so maybe the other thing to consider related to this, maybe as a warning, is that a lot of what I've talked about, or we've talked about in terms of marketing, is marketing that would work for other developers and not necessarily the people that will buy from you. And I'm not a genius at this, and I don't have all the answers, but I do know that there is a difference between connecting to developers and connecting to the people that pay the bills. And so that's an aspect that you want to figure out, like what your strategy is there. And again, because it's the unpredictable world, sometimes it does turn out that somebody found your blog post that helped them solve a problem at work. They talked to their boss and said, hey, we need this guy. He would help us with XYZ. Boss is convinced, they call you and you come in, right? But that's not always how it works. And it may mean that you may need to find other marketing avenues that go after the people that actually write the checks, the people that can actually make the decision. And sometimes they're not developers. They're not the ones that are, reading dev content or, on Rails forums or whatever. So you want to think about, like, and again, this goes back to, well, where do you find clients? Well, which ones do you want? Where do you find those people? And that means starting to think like a fish. Where do fish like to be? If I was this kind of fish, where would I be? And so again, that's like kind of getting back to, well, for me, I like to serve the bootstrappers and people that are like building their own products on their own, and then finally need another Rails dev to come in and help them along the way. Well, right now, one of the best plays I would think to go to find that would be people that are getting in on Bullet Train or Jumpstart Pro, because they're coming in saying, I want to build a Rails product. And so they get in those communities and start, use a starter pack to start building their apps. And both of those communities have Discord channels or Slack groups or whatever, where the people that are working those products are. And like, if I was looking for work right now, that's one of the places I would be going to, like, spend time with people and say, like, try to make friends with people over in Jumpstart or Bullet Train, looking for ways to be helpful, and then hopefully connecting to some solo founders that realize, oh, hey, like, I need to bring someone else in to, like, move feature development along faster or something like that. That's just one example.
I'll add something to that, Jeremy. I kind of make a distinction between lead generation and credibility. So everything I do is directed at developers. And I think what you said is exactly what happens a lot of time. Like, I'll reach a developer, but then the developer will talk to their boss or whatever, and then that kind of thing will happen. And I've talked to other people, especially people who do training. It often works out that way. But then there's credibility. Like, I might find myself in conversation with somebody who's not in the programming world, or maybe they're some kind of programming manager, and they're not reading this content themselves. But if they go check out my website and they see, oh, he's spoken at RailsConf, RubyConf, he's spoken in like 7 different countries, like, okay, like, yeah. So those are like 2 different things done for 2 different reasons. And I feel like it's helpful to kind of be aware of that distinction.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, you definitely need to have your site set up so that when people go to hunt for you to say, all right, can I find any objections to why we should hire this person, right? That they don't find any, and that they find only supporting things. So whether it's, and I haven't done a great job of this, like my current site, it needs to be a lot better. But if I was struggling for work right now, if I needed clients, one of the first things I would do is go work on that and include more client testimonials. I need to get a photo of myself on there. Right now, this is not a primary way that I just haven't needed work in a while. I need to get back to this question too, because total sidebar just for a second. If you do long-term retainer contracts the way I do, you don't need that many leads a year, and you only need a couple to convert. So it feels terrifying to think about a giant agency to me, like of 50 people that need to have projects all the time, right? You're having to close deals all the time. I don't have to close that many deals. I have clients that last 2 years plus many times, 6 months to 2 years plus. That means I need to close one or two deals a year. It's just not that many leads. It's not that many sales. It's very manageable.
That's a
Anyway,
great
so
point.
back to that issue, like you want a place that people can go and sort of verify who you are, what your services are, and look for any objections for why they shouldn't hire you. And so being able to communicate clearly, have have your profile and things match what the other person that came to them saying we should hire so and so, they can see those things. All the evidence that you can share, whether it's like speaking at conferences or a book you wrote or set a blog series on a certain topic or whatever it was, those things are all valuable things to say, okay, this is a good reason. This is a good reason. No, I guess that objection goes away. Okay. And then by the time they're done, they're ready and primed to say yes to you.
Yeah, small detail I'll mention because it's kind of relevant. It's a good idea to have your own domain name with an email address at that domain name. Nothing screams amateur more than like a Gmail email address if you're trying to be a freelancer.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's just us and the hardcore fans now.
Okay, so if I can, I'll share a couple of other ideas.
Yeah.
So one is that as I well, let me step back. I wanted to mention that freelancing can be fairly simple, and you can go into hard mode and make it harder, or you can make it more risky or exciting, however you want to think about that. There was a period in my life a few years back where I was going through a really bad depression, but I was freelancing, and I'm the sole breadwinner for my family. I got a wife and 3 kids, and I still did it, and I wasn't taking a lot of risks, and I kept the same clients that I had, and it was stable, and I got my work done. And even with poor mental health, I did survive. So that was sort of like minimal Jeremy kind of doing his thing. In the past year, I've been sort of upping the ante for myself now that I'm in a better spot, getting therapy, doing well in life, those kind of things. I'm taking more risks, going to conferences last year, putting on a conference this year, starting a podcast, trying new things. So you can work with your own set of your own mental health, your own place in life. There's a point where our kids were really young. It was just hard to take on any other thing. Your kids are just exhausting you. I got 2 teenagers now. It's just not as hard to manage them. There's not as much hands-on involvement. I'm in a place where I can take some bigger risks or put myself out in ways that in my own work that are harder and may, take bigger swings, I guess. And so you can change those dials as you need to. And it can go from hey, this is I just need to kind of be sort of stable and secure and safe in this, but still freelancing, all the way to this is a wild ride. I'm trying all this stuff and throwing things against the wall and all that kind of stuff. And at least for me right now, that's really exciting. And I think that can be I don't know, for me that's part of that's part of why I want to do it, because I got the freedom to do that stuff. I have the freedom to I don't have to ask anybody can I use some hours today to start to do a podcast. I don't have to do that. I just do it. If I want to try a new service offering, I've got a couple ideas that I'm thinking about, that I've been sort of spitballing with people, doing an embedded junior developer mentorship service, as an idea I've had. What if companies have junior developers and they say, well, we just don't know how to mentor them. Our senior devs, they're busy building features. What if I sold a service where I came in and sort of embedded with that junior dev and sort of paired with them and helped them level up? And that was like a service offering that I had. And the two of us are sort of joining this company together in a way. They're full time, but I'm just coming in like beside them, right? That could be an interesting service. Like, what if I tried to offer that? What if I built a landing page for that? That'd be cool. I wonder if anybody would go for that. So like, just starting to think about like other things, because it's not just software development I'm doing. There's other things that I could offer, and that could make my life interesting. That could bring new things my way, and who knows what that might entail. So, I've thought about doing like, okay, I'm doing this conference. It'd be really fun to put on like to find other independent Rails devs and like book an Airbnb, in the mountains and do 4 days of like, we do like a retreat together and bring some technical problems and some business problems. And we'll have some structured time where we work on those things, unstructured time where we hang out. And I'll charge, like 2,500 or something for people to come do that. I wonder if I could get like 12 people to do that. That would be interesting. It's that kind of stuff that you start to think about and like have that creativity of like, I should. There's no one to stop me from doing this. I could do this. It's like that's what starts to be fun about not just thinking about just contracting or I'm filling the role as if I'm an employee in this company, but deciding to offer completely different services, something like wild. And not everything's going to work, but some of those things might work and some of them might be really fun, might be really exciting, to try or just to have at least have the experience, and that to me is like the joy of freelancing. And maybe that's the question, like it comes even before, well, how do I find clients? It's like, why do you want to freelance? Like, what is in this for you? And for me, like making a ton of money isn't the main goal. The main goal is like freedom, creative freedom, control of my schedule, the ability to try a bunch of stuff, the ability to try to run in a conference. I went to urban farm school several years back for like 7 months and learned all about agriculture, like while I'm freelancing on the side. It's something I couldn't have done like with a full-time job. When our kids were little, I helped homeschool our kids. Like my wife and I kind of shared some responsibility. She did more than I did, but I certainly was involved and did like a day homeschooling my kids, things that would have just been really hard to do otherwise. And I love that. That's part of what my why for why I keep doing it. And even when there are times where it's stressful or hard, like that's what keeps me doing it. And I think that's having an answer for that is really important.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I don't know about you, Jeremy, but it has taken me a long time to kind of figure out who I am and like what kinds of things are like me things.
Yeah.
Like I never realized that I would be a podcast kind of person. Like I never saw myself as like having a podcast as like a big part of my life, but it turns out that is. Side note, in high school, I got voted most likely to be a talk show host, which I thought was really uncharacteristic. And it was a real mystery, but now it kind of like has happened a little bit, which is weird.
Yeah. So all your classmates knew you better than you did.
I guess so. Yeah, and like this meetup that I'm doing, like this, I don't know. I just like got a wild hair up my ass one day and decided to start doing this. And I think it's been great. Like people actually come to it, to my surprise. And this has been a way to like form personal relationships with people in a way that a lot of the other stuff I've tried hasn't. And before this, I've tried so much stuff that has just fallen flat and like nobody was interested, didn't work. I've gone through a lot of pain, but all that pain was worth it to like figure out the things that like, okay, I'm not this kind of person who does this. Like I used to go to Chamber of Commerce meetings to try to get clients. It was terrible. So I'm not that kind of person who does that. I'm this other kind of person who does this. And I think it might take a person a while to figure those things out.
Yeah. This actually ties back into Daniel Fasalo's small bets and the idea that like if you have to swing big on everything that you do, you're going to have so many failures. You will just feel you'll be out of money or out of energy, out of like you just feel demoralized. and I've definitely gone all in. I had I was doing freelancing and I was building a startup on the side, and it failed after 4 or 5 years, and I was demoralized. It wiped me out for several years where I was just so upset about this thing that had failed. And then it's come to me now, years later, that was a thing that I overextended myself on. I made it so that I put so much of my heart into this thing that I cared about, and so much of my time into this thing that I couldn't have it fail. And that when it finally did, I was so devastated that I couldn't even think of ideas anymore. And it took me a while to even get back to that. So I think it's super important to be able to take smaller, especially when you're starting, take smaller bets, try smaller things. And it's okay when some of them fail. You don't want to be so all in on one thing that that when it does fail, you're completely devastated by it. You want to be able to sort of recover and maybe learn a lesson from that thing and try again. I think that's really important, and that's sort of my strategy going forward.
Well, it's 10:30 here in Michigan. I think it's probably a good time to start winding things down. Jeremy, I really appreciate you coming and doing this. By the way, have you ever considered, Jeremy, doing like letting people hire you to teach them how to do freelancing?
I've never thought about it, but that sounds interesting.
Yeah. Well, dear viewer, me and Jeremy are available for coaching. It's $5,000 an hour. Email us now.
I'll do it for 4. I'll do it for 4.
Yeah, thanks again. And remember Blue Ridge Ruby, what's the dates for that again?
Yeah, June 8th and 9th, we're still doing tickets. It's Thursday, Friday, and then Saturday we've got these extra activities that people can do together, go to Biltmore, which is this really cool mansion in Asheville, very beautiful historic place. Tubing, we're gonna go tubing on this river, go hiking. So we got a bunch of cool activities. We kind of just have to pick one, but we've got groups going to each one of those things. And yeah, so blueridgeruby.com. I think it's gonna be fun. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, Jeremy, thanks again. This has been great.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. Good to see everybody.
All right. Bye, guys.
Take care.
Take care.